All right, we're going to start another lesson in Daniel. The wise shall understand, the study of Daniel, and this will be lesson 8. So we're going to look today at the golden image. And we're going to start off in Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. And so this verse is going to talk about the image of gold. Daniel 3:1 says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, which is 60 cubits is 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, some people believe that this was a statue of a man, possibly a statue of Nebuchadnezzar himself. Now, if this was a statue of a man, it was grotesque since the proportions were 1 to 10 instead of 1 to 6, which is the normal proportion of man. So the question is, what was this? The verses do not say what it was. So it may have been part man image and part pillar. The image may have been mounted on a tall pedestal with a human figure mounted on top, as depicted there. So you can see how slim that image would have been if that was a man image. Okay. 60 cubits or 90 feet would have been the height of it, and 6 cubits, 9 feet, remind us of the mark of the beast of Revelation 13, whose number is 666. And that will become clearer as we move along in the next few slides. On the 6th day, God created man. So 6 is the number of man's failure. So 6 is the number of man. That's why a lot of times when I teach Revelation chapter 13, we get to the verse about 666, I point out that we can calculate all we want about who this might be. I have my own thoughts about who this might be, but the simplest way to explain it is that it essentially it's simply the number of man, 666. And so man making himself into God, if you will. So 6 always comes up short of divine perfection. Man can never get to the point where he is perfect. He's always at least one short of divine, which is represented by 7. Now the proportions may suggest that this was an obelisk. It certainly was very tall and very thin. So take a look at this. Could it be something like this? Could it have been an obelisk? Because certainly obelisks were commonplace in the East, particularly in Egypt in those days. That one that's sitting out in front of the Vatican there is from Egypt. So, and the one that's sitting over there to the right is the Washington Monument. Both obelisks of the same type. Now notice, interestingly, you can see that in the Vatican there, what do you see? Egyptian obelisk in a sundial or representing a form of sun worship. This was taken by Rome many centuries ago and placed at the Vatican, and right into that circle there, representing a sundial. And actually a pope did an exorcism on this image or this idol, if you will, from Egypt to chase out the evil demons that might be, or evil gods that might be infecting this statue. So certainly the Pope should have had a good idea that something was amiss here when he put this statue up, or this obelisk up in that piazza in Rome. Now the Washington Monument, and you look this up, is 555.5 feet high, represents 6,666 inches high, and I did the calculations to make sure that what I was saying was correct. And the base of it is 660 inches wide at the base. Interestingly, actually, it's been sinking a little bit, so those numbers do change a bit, but it may have been 660 inches at the beginning, 666 inches at the beginning, wide at the base, and certainly interesting to contemplate these numbers in this obelisk that was funded and put up by the Masons. And there's Masonic symbols inside this Washington Monument, and of course Washington himself was a Freemason. Now notice that the Washington Monument, which is noted by the symbol 23, or the number 23, is connected with a circle, as is the Vatican obelisk. Remember, we said it was in that sundial, it was a circle, and so the Washington Monument sitting right there in the middle of a circle as well. Egyptian obelisks of this type were phallic symbols commemorating the lost part of Osiris who had been dismembered. So this goes back to Babylon, where it was supposedly Nimrod who was dismembered, and Semiramis went around looking for all the lost parts. And she found all but one. Poor Nimrod, right? So, but anyway, as the mystery religions moved out of Babylon, many of these traditions carried over, and in Egypt it was Osiris and Isis representing Nimrod and Semiramis. So the Vatican obelisk was an obelisk of this type brought from Egypt. Now, notice this, that in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., there is a painting by a Catholic painter from the Vatican area, as I understand it, called The Apotheosis or Deification of Washington Among Pagan Deities at the Top of the Capitol Dome. And let me give you a little closer picture of that. And there you see a closer picture, and you see George Washington sitting in the midst of these heavenly beings. But notice, particularly, so that you can get the flavor of this, particularly at the upper left, you see a depiction of somebody there with a trident, which would have been Neptune. So if you go around there, you can probably name all of these gods that are up there. So why would paganism be painted into the Capitol Dome? Something to think about, okay? So 6 miles southeast of Babylon, archaeologists have found ruins believed to be the foundation of this image. According to Fawcett's Bible Dictionary, Oppert found in the Dura plain, at what is called the Mounds of Dura, the pedestal of what must have been a colossal statue. The gold of this second image represented Nebuchadnezzar's glory. God, through Daniel, told Nebuchadnezzar that the head of gold of the first image was Babylon. This image may have been erected as an act of self-deification of Nebuchadnezzar and for his glory to honor a Babylonian god. And so that's very possible that that was the case. Don't forget those obelisks represented a lost part of Osiris. So this is certainly something that went on in the East at that time. So Daniel, chapter 3, verse 2, then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. According to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, this image was dedicated in 585 BC, perhaps to celebrate his victory over Jerusalem. So give you a little bit of history of what was happening in Jerusalem at the time to indicate why he might be celebrating a victory. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar had entered Jerusalem and took King Jehoiakim captive, together with Ezekiel the prophet and Mordecai, the uncle of Esther. That's found in Esther 2, verse 6. Now, Daniel had been taken early on. He'd been taken in the first wave of the captivity, and now we're looking at the second wave of captivity here in 597. Now, he then stripped the temple and treasury of its riches and placed the king's uncle Zedekiah on the throne. Now, 9 years later, in 588 BC, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem after Zedekiah rebelled. Now, there's one thing you don't want to do if you're in a position like that with a dictator that is going to control everything. You do not want to rebel against the dictator, do you? Not unless you have a lot of firepower behind you to start with. So Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 BC. Now, that's getting close to that 585 BC date that we talked about this statue being erected. So you can kind of get an idea that maybe because of these victories here, that was the reason this statue was being erected. This is supposition on my part, but I think it may be valid. Sounds exactly like what a victorious king might be doing. He entered Jerusalem, seized Zedekiah the king, slaughtered his children before his eyes. Imagine that you bring your children in front of you and slaughter them, and then blinded him. Can you imagine being blinded right after you see your own children being slaughtered before your eyes? The last thing on earth that you ever saw was your children dying in front of you, knowing that you had no posterity to follow after you. So after they blinded him, they took him to Babylon in feathers to die. In fetters, I should say. They didn't tar and feather the guy. They took him in fetters, which means they bound him, and they took him to die in captivity. So 2 Chronicles 36, 5-20 describes the succeeding Jewish kings from Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin to Zedekiah. Both Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin did evil and were carried off to Babylon. Special attention was reserved for Zedekiah. 2 Kings 25, 1-12 vividly portrays Nebuchadnezzar's final conquest of Jerusalem and Zedekiah's defeat Now let's look at 2 Kings in this regards. 2 Kings 25 and verse 1. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, I should say, king of Babylon came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and they built forts against it round about. And the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine prevailed in the city, and there was no bread for the people of the land. And the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between two walls, which is by the king's garden. Now the Chaldees were against the city round about, and the king went the way toward the plain. And the army of the Chaldees pursued after the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army were scattered from him. So they took the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon to Riblah, and they gave judgment upon him, and they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. And in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem. So they're not finished with Jerusalem yet. And he burnt the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. And all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard brake down the walls of Jerusalem round about. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the refugees, or the fugitives, I should say, that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away. But the captain of the guard left the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So they didn't leave the land completely void of people. They left the poorest of the poor, the ones that would dress the land, not ones that would take up arms or have any idea of taking up arms against the king of Babylon. So now we'll look at the command to worship, because Nebuchadnezzar is going to command worship of this particular statue. Daniel 3:3. Then the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at that time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music. Ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whosoever faileth not, who falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Sounds very similar to some other wording that we're going to see in the book of Revelation. If you don't worship, something's going to happen to you. And then later on, God said, something will happen to you if you do. And we'll see that in this lesson. The meaning of the various titles are princes equals satraps, governors as prefects, captains as governors, judges are counselors, treasurers are treasurers. They always are treasurers. People take care of your money, never seem to change, right? counselors, our law officials or judges, sheriffs, our magistrates. Loud music. Loud music is used to stir man's emotions and deaden his natural senses. Loud music is a brainwashing tactic used to control man's pursuits and behavior. Today we see rock music controlling the emotions and habits of our young people. Even subliminal messages have been used in rock music to stir the emotions of the unsuspecting young. Now, when I was a much younger man and had more hair, I read a Reader's Digest magazine on an airplane, and it was talking about the purpose of music in department stores and other establishments, business establishments and what have you. And in there they said one of the reasons is that they try to give soothing music so people will stay calm and that they have a good buying experience and will not get all keyed up and things like that. So therefore they use instrumental music like violins or something like Mantovani was a big orchestra back in those days that played nice, sweet music and what have you. And this is the type of music that was played in department stores. But you know, if you go into a department store today, you're liable to hear all kinds of music. Particularly, you go into a fast food restaurant, you're going to get some maybe rock and roll and a few other things like that. But they kind of key you up, and they keep you in a stressful mood and what have you. This article was pointing out that they did not want, in other words, they wanted to keep the shopping experience stress-free. And, when sometimes I go to Starbucks to study, and I take my noise-canceling earphones because I don't like the music that Starbucks is playing. But rock music has a purpose in this new world order: to stir up the emotions of children, to stir up the emotions of the people, and to even send subliminal messages that you can't even today. Back in the day, you could understand the words of the music. Today, you do not understand the words. The beat is the thing. But they can also give you a message through those words that only your mind can understand. So, music is a tool, I believe, of bringing on the end times New World Order. Now, Satan wants the children. Hitler didn't care about the old. He had already persuaded the youth. Our troops beamed music at Noriega in Panama to break down his will to resist. I don't know how many remember that going on, but they were blasting music into wherever Noriega was hiding out in order to break down his will to resist. Music played in stores is no longer soothing. All were to worship the image. In Nebuchadnezzar's time, now we're back to that. All were to worship the image as decreed by the king. Nebuchadnezzar's goal was world government with him as ruler. This is the way it is with all of these rulers. They want world control and world recognition. No matter what leader it is and no matter what country it is, they all want to have recognition on the world stage. And I believe that the United States of America is no different from any other country in the world in this regard. Now the best way to carry this out, the best way is to unify people to world government, is to unite them religiously, and I believe that is going on in many churches today. We see this being attempted today with various ecumenical and tolerance movements as regards to religion. Council on Foreign Relations member Pastor Rick Warren's peace plan as unity with all faiths as the goal, seeking accommodation rather than evangelism. Now, I heard a fellow that had a mission to the Muslims on a radio program a few years back, speaking about that he had a fairly successful ministry to Muslim people, and so he got a call from Saddleback Church, which is Rick Warren's church. They invited him in. They wanted to talk to him. They wanted to discuss this ministry with him. So he went in and he talked to him, and he then started talking about witnessing and evangelizing the Muslims. And he was cut off, and he said, no, that's not what we plan. He says, what we want is accommodation. We want unity with the Muslim people. And so he got very discouraged over that. They were offering him a job, but he would have to quit his evangelizing. He would have to somehow figure out a way to have accommodation with the Muslim people. So the world is trying to meld together the various Eastern and Western religions into a common belief system. I believe, with all my heart, I believe that that's exactly what they're after. And it's more than just the church is. It has to do with see, here's Rick Warren there at the bottom of this slide. Rick Warren with an arrow pointing over to the Council on Foreign Relations. His membership in the Council on Foreign Relations gives him access to the world through the United Nations. Okay? So this is where he gets his power. And he's called America's pastor. But he's called America's pastor by the media, who has made him America's pastor. The Bible says that the image of the Antichrist will be set up in the last days, and the people will be forced to worship it or be killed. Revelation 13. This will be the ultimate one-world religion. This is now under construction by Rick Warren and the emergent church leaders in association with the Catholic Church. Now take a look. Unity produces accommodation, produces cooperation, leads to world religion. The first guy depicted there is a guy by the name of William Swing. I think he's retired now, but he was leading the way in setting up a united religions for the United Nations. And he's an Episcopal bishop in San Francisco. And Thomas Burton, he's now went on to whatever happy hunting ground he has gone to. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk, and his big thing was meditation and contemplative prayer, which has made a big inroads in the churches, in many of the churches today. Contemplative prayer is kind of like centering, and it is looking for that spark of divine that is in you. And many, many churches, I could name a few, I won't go into that this time. And then you have the Reverend Billy Graham and his association with Catholics and the Pope there. Then you suddenly find that the Pope, this present Pope here, has reached down into the name it and claim it group and picked out Kenneth Copeland, and Kenneth Copeland now is a friend of the Pope. And there you have the Pope together with evangelical leaders. You have Pope John Paul II kissing the Quran. Now, why would he do that? Why would a Pope kiss the Quran? Now, even the church is being lulled into the urge to merge with programs such as the Council on Foreign Relations member Rick Warren's purpose-driven is driving many pastors to value church growth over spiritual growth and truth. According to the United Religions website, a bishop's quest is the story of one man's, or Bishop William Swing, campaign to gather the best of religion in order to counter rising religiously motivated violence. United Religions Initiative logo is depicted there, and the Reverend Bishop Swing is also depicted. I'll give you a little bit of a history of that. In 1993, the United Nations was planning to celebrate its 50th anniversary in San Francisco, where the UN Charter was signed in 1945, and asked the Episcopal Bishop of California, William Swing, to host an interfaith and intercultural celebration at Grace Cathedral featuring all nations and all religions. In context of this event, it dawned on Bishop Swing that the nations of the world have met daily for 50 years to pursue peace, but during that same time, the religions haven't met once. So the nations have met daily for peace, but the religions have not met once, is what he's saying. It was time to create a united religion. So this is what Bishop Swing set out to do. And there's a book that he wrote, Make No Mistake, A Bishop's Quest Founding a United Religions. And make no mistake about it, Rick Warren and many other church leaders, whether they are aware of it or not, have become participants in the plans of the United Nations, United Religions, and the church growth movement. Besides the infection of the church, the schools have long been targets to change the worldview of the children. Can't say enough about that. But Barrett Jose, in her book Brave New Schools, now this is not really recent information, but it's still, I think, sets the stage and shows you what the public school is capable of doing. So Connecticut fourth graders use guided imagery to experience Indian tribal life and meet wise spirit helpers. Colorado sixth graders enjoy spirit dances wearing their class-made masks. Oregon students celebrate winter solstice by acting the roles of the sun god, moon goddess, drummers, and animal spirits. California students wear masks that help them identify with their favorite Greek gods and goddesses earth-centered religions are in. This might be old news, but it's pretty up to date. Earth-centered religions are in. Having rejected biblical Christianity, and mark my words, they have rejected it from the top down. Educational change agents have realized that some kind of global spirituality is needed to fuel a collective pursuit of global unity. Now, change agents are what teachers are called in this system. Although Native American spirituality provides the perfect model and brings the least resistance from the concerned parents, any one of the world's New Age or neo-pagan religions will do, offering a common alternative to the biblical God. They all blend one or more of the following. Pantheism, all is God and God is all. Since a universal force infuses all things with spiritual life, today's popularized versions encourages everyone to look within for the strength, wisdom, and guidance needed to empower oneself for success. Monism, all is one, joined together through the pantheistic spirituality. Polytheism, many gods. Since the pantheistic deity makes everything sacred, people can worship anything or anyone they choose. Children learn that in the end, all the world's gods lead to the same happy spirit world, and that's what they want to do. They want to get rid of a religion that says that you must believe in your Savior, Jesus Christ. You must get rid of that and join with the rest of the world in unity in an amalgamation of all these world religions so that we can be tolerant. Few classroom texts dare mention the terrors and tortures that have always oppressed pagan cultures, those that sought power and wisdom from occult forces. The new spirituality in the schools is neo-paganism, which is disguised as personal empowerment and harmony with nature. This global or earth-centered spirituality seduces both young and old who ignore the tragic lessons of history. Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code was neo-paganism or neo-Gnosticism, I should say. This kind of religion is acceptable. It's just that they have to get rid of our kind of religion, the true religion of the true God. And if you doubt that, then look what Vice President Al Gore seems to advocate, that he advocates a return to some form of Gaia worship or Gaia goddess worship in his book, Earth in the Balance. Now, I don't know if you're aware that Al Gore, your former vice president, want to be president, wrote a book about the environmental issues, and it's called Earth in the Balance. And on page 258, he speaks of the spiritual richness and diversity of our religious tradition throughout history that has been ignored by minds closed to teachings outside their own system of belief. So he's telling you that we need to pay particular attention to and learn from these other religions. Gore continues with the fast pace of knowledge in our time has led to an intense new interest in the different perspectives on life in other cultures and has spurred a renewed investigation of the wisdom distilled by all faiths. This pan-religious perspective may prove especially important where our global civilization's responsibility for the earth is concerned. He wants an earth-centered religion. That's what he's saying. So on pages 261 and 263, he praises the Baha'i faith and advocates a change in our Christian religious beliefs when he quotes Catholic theologian Teilhard de Chardin, quote, "The fate of mankind as well as of religion depends upon the emergence of a new faith in the future." He wants to scrap it all. At the Parliament of Religions, 1993, a mixture of Christian and non-Christian religions, the papal representative, Archbishop Francesco Gioia from the Vatican, said the following: "Other religions may achieve salvation. The differences in other religions does not prevent them from obtaining salvation." So it's okay, whatever religion you want. You can obtain salvation. He observed that other religions reflect the truth of God. Truth, he said, lies hidden in other religions. Truth in all religions constitutes ground for dialogue. Dialogue was opened by God's initiative. So it's okay. You can be pan-religious, if you like, and still get to heaven, according to this guy. He added, "A change has come. We now talk, listen to, and walk together. There is good news of friendship among us all." This is the problem with the unity movement in the churches. Unity in the movement in the churches says that we have to give up something that is offensive to someone else in our particular doctrinal beliefs. So what is it that all of these churches have to leave on the cutting room floor when they decide to merge into a one-world religion? Because certainly they will not get an agreement unless they all agree to give up something. How can this Catholic bishop say what he said? The official catechism of the Catholic Church says this in section 841. And this is directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. He said, the 841 says, the Church's relationship with the Muslims, the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator in the first place, amongst whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us, they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. So the Catholic Church believes Allah is Jehovah. That's why the Pope can kiss the Quran. That's directly copied from, I copied it myself, from the official Catholic Catechism. The ideas of one world power and glory first set before us in Babylon is still fresh in the minds of world leaders today. The first symbol of this was the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. Interestingly, this same concept is blatantly portrayed in the symbol of an unfinished tower seen in a poster and in the construction of the European Parliament building proclaiming the formation of the European Union. And look at these. You see a painting here by a painter by the name of Bruegel in the 1500s, I think it was. And notice that the European Union poster up there that talks about Europe, many tongues, one voices. This was early in the formation of the European Union when this poster came out. And if you can see it up there, you'll see some people down there, and they all have rectangular heads, right? But look at the baby. One of them is holding a baby. The baby actually, you don't see it too well up there, but the baby is a round-headed baby. Not yet conformed. It has to be educated. And then you have the down-pointing stars, which is another satanic reference to Baphomet. Okay, so they are purposely using the Tower of Babel as a rallying point to form their government system. It's almost like shaking their fists at God, right? This unfinished tower theme is also represented on the Great Seal of the United States and on the reverse of the dollar bill with the unfinished pyramid on which is proclaimed Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. If you notice that there are three depicted down there. The first one is the one that was first proposed. The middle one was what was accepted. And even the words are different, and I'll show that in a minute. And then what's on the back of the dollar bill is the official reverse of the seal of the United States. Now, notice that the reverse side of the Great Seal put on our dollar bill by 32nd degree Freemason President Roosevelt in 1933. Now, in the final version, now the original version, it said, God favors everlasting as a direct reference to God. And that was proposed in 1782. And Deo favorante perennis, God favors everlasting. In the final version, the capstone is not yet in place. Now, there's no capstone in the first one. But there's the all-seeing eye there. Now, in the final version, the capstone is not yet in place. The pyramid is unfinished. Now, the final approved design, Annuit Coeptus Novus Ordo Seclorum, he approves our undertaking, new secular order, and it only gives you an assumption that they're talking about God. So that's the final approved design. Now, President Bill Clinton's presidential library is also in the form of an unfinished bridge. The idea is that the world is proceeding to finish what was begun in defiance to God at Babylon. There is no doubt that the world is proceeding towards global unification or utopia and has been for centuries. Today, under the auspices of the United Nations, or something else of God or man's making. Now, notice these particular images here. One is a model of the European Union Parliament building in Strasbourg, France. Notice that the tower depicted there is unfinished. You can clearly see that it is an unfinished tower. So it was designed to represent the rebuilding of the Tower of Babel. And notice right next to that is a photograph of that tower portion of the Parliament building there in Strasbourg, France. And you'll see that, that they indeed built this as an unfinished tower. Now notice what happens when you take Bruegel's painting of the 1500s and you kind of merge it photographically with the Parliament building there, of the unfinished tower of the Parliament building. You'll find that they line up quite perfectly. So there's no question in anybody's mind that they were intentionally rebuilding Nimrod's Tower of Babel, European Union. So Nebuchadnezzar is a type of the future Antichrist that will be the world leader in the end times. This future Antichrist was set about to finish the final consolidation of the nations and religious systems of the world. This Antichrist will look to be worshipped as God. All who oppose and fail to worship him will be executed. And if you miss the rapture, prepare yourselves. They say they're going to chop your head off. I think that's a preferable way to go than some other ways I could think of. I think it'd be over in seconds, you know. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but just do not take the mark of the beast. I'll explain that even more as we get finish up here. Now, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes, verse 4, who opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Revelation 13, and we're going to read all of Revelation 13. Revelation 13:1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, or Satan, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So this beast is going to be empowered by Satan in these last days. And verse 5, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. That's 3.5 years. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle on them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. He's going to have great power. Verse 8, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. earth dwellers in the Scripture are the unsaved. So if you see all that dwell on the earth or earth dwellers, be assured that it refers to those that are unsaved. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship. Causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly head was healed, the deadly wound was healed, and he goeth and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by the sword and did live. Somehow I didn't finish. Let me get to, because I want to go, actually I'm going to finish up with Revelation chapter 14. If we can go over to Revelation chapter 14 and look at that. Because I want to show you what is going to happen if you happen to stick around here on earth and you decide, well, for the sake of my family, I'm going to take the mark of the beast and worship the image of the beast so that I can eat and buy and sell. Don't do that. It says in Revelation chapter 14, let's see, and let's start in verse 9, and it says, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So do not take the mark of the beast, or you will suffer eternal punishment. I don't even think I finished on that slide. Somehow my slides have slipped off. Couldn't have been me. It just happened. But I didn't finish even Revelation 13, which actually goes into the buying and selling and the mark of the beast. Anyway, with that, we'll bring it to a close. Sorry about that. It wasn't totally complete. I'm going to have to go look at my notes.